These phonics lessons are produced for non-profit purposes out of love for Jesus Christ. This lesson, we're focusing on the language of origin in the words of English and how that relates to their spelling and pronunciation, and also some syllable division later. Here, we're just going to start to look at some of the words and see how they differ. These words are from Old English. Those are the root of most of the words in English. And almost all of our common words and common nouns are from Old English. In fact, of the most 100 common words in English, almost all of them are from Old English. Here are some of them. I'll say a few of them now so you can get a feel for them. Time has looked to more number first water oil. The of was for with his they one. All were we when your said there. Here are some more words with Old English root. While the last words had a lot of function words like conjunctions and prepositions and pronouns, these words are all basic nouns or compound words that describe the most common things around us. For example, bird, swine, horse, climb, taught, know, right, and some compound words made up of these words like cloudburst, coattails, forefather. They are also common verbs like taught, climb, and right, and know. Some of our common words also come from Old Norse. Old Norse and Old English are both Germanic languages and will have a similar feel and sound. These, however, are even a little more awkward, as in the third word awkward, than the Old English sounding words. Anger, ado, freckle, oaf, stake, window, thwart. In 1066, after the Battle of Hastings, French was spoken by the ruling class in England, and English would not have predominance again until the 14th century. While commoners still spoke English, the language of the ruling class and of written documents was now in French, and a whole bunch of French words entered the language. This French was closer to Latin, and so many back then had more Latin spellings. However, some have French spellings, and also French words that entered later would have more French spellings. Here are some French words. See their different sound. French, like Latin, is a Romance language and has a more melodic, romantic sound. Regard, servant, chef, garage, fatigue. Soup, rouge, machine. There are also many words of Latin origin in the English language. Latin has always been the language of scholars, and it was also the language of the early church. So, when people needed a new word, they often went back to Latin roots to coin new words. Latin is often used to describe more complex concepts and new ideas or inventions. Latin words are usually 2 or more syllables long. Latin is also, like French, a Romance language. Its sounds are more romantic and melodic, less harsh and clunky than words of Old English origin. Listen to a few Latin words to hear the difference. Aquatic, democratic, feminine, judicial, linguistics, nocturnal. Proclamation, terrestrial, bisect, inject, crucial, spacious. Aquarium, radio, educate, individual, language. While there are not as many Greek words as the other languages of origin, there are a lot of Greek words in science and theology. Christ, biology, amphibious, metamorphosis. Microphone, photograph, pterodactyl. This is a pictorial representation of the words that have entered English. On the bottom level we have Old English, which includes words of Old Norse origin, a Germanic base, strong words that are usually short. They are responsible for the majority of written or spoken English because they are the most common words in the English language. However, they are not the majority percentage-wise of the words that make up English. They just get used over and over again. According to an Oxford survey of the most common words in English, they are responsible for only 25% of the words in the English language. At the next level up, we have our Romance languages. Latin, a mixture of Latin and French. These have a more romantic, melodic sound. They are also usually at least 2 syllables long. These words, according to the Oxford survey, are responsible for 25% of our words from Latin origin and 28% of our words from French origin. However, I've added a category in the middle which shows both. For many words, it's hard to determine which language they came into English from because the Latin and French roots are often similar. For example, the word confess has a Latin root of confessare and a French root of confessor. In the top left, we show some words of Greek origin. While they are approximately 5% in the words of English, in some types of material they will be overrepresented, like certain scientific fields and also in theology. And the other smaller circle shows Spanish and Native American. In American English, some of our more common words are represented by these. However, all other languages, including these two, are less than 1% of the words in English. Now, we'll see how the same coloring scheme of word origin works within an actual reading passage, a reading from Romans. Here we'll just look at the words. Faith, receive, doubtful, disputations, these are all from either Latin or French. And the pink, servant, is from French. Now we're going to look at how some of these basic English words are repeated. This is how it shrinks down if we take down God, him, he, man, ye, and thou. They're repeated a lot. And here we've taken out a few more function words that are repeated. That, in, the, but, not, or, to, for, and which. Here is some more of our Romans reading. Persuaded is of Latin origin, fully of either or both, and regard from French. The next bit happens to be comprised solely of words of Old English origin. This part has Christ from the Greek and revive and judge from either Latin or French, roots of both. And the last part of our Romans reading has confess from either Latin or French and account from French. Now that you've seen how it works in an actual passage, here is a picture again showing the origin of our words. Now we're going to review our syllable division rules. The first is divide between 2 consonants, and syllables that end in a consonant will be short. Another syllable division rule, divide between 2 words. And divide before and after blends. Again, it's ending in a consonant, so they'll be short. Divide before one consonant, and syllables ending in a vowel are long. Here we have a Latin exception, showing how word origin plays into our rules. Latin will divide different than English, and it will divide after the consonant, making the vowel short. Another syllable division rule, you divide between vowel teams that don't make a sound. And yet another Latin exception. Latin doesn't have many 2-letter vowel teams, and sometimes Latin will divide between two vowels that will make a sound in English, like in these words. IE and UE make sounds in English, but often divide in Latin words. This is an easy one. Divide after prefixes and before suffixes. And our final syllable division rules, LE and EL. LE, you'll divide one letter before the LE, but EL divides directly before. Now we're going to look at some sound comparisons across languages. If English was just composed of one type of language, then there wouldn't be any spelling difficulties. However, because it's taken from several, there are a couple things. When you look within each language, you'll see how these play out. Old English words, the CH has a ch sound, like in childhood, benchmark. French, CH has a sh sound, like in chef or chateau. And in Greek, CH has a k sound, like in Christ and chronological. Also, the blue vowel team, OU, says ow in words of Old English origin. Old English here also includes Old Norse. They're related Germanic languages. In French, OU will have a oo sound, like soup and rouge. As we go through these charts, you begin to see why in spelling bees the contestants often ask for the word origin. First, we'll look at some vowel differences. In words of Old English origin, two vowels together often work together to make a sound, as in coattails, treehouse, tooth, town, earth, yellow. In Latin, usually there is only a single vowel, but when two vowels are together in Latin, they will often divide between the vowels, with each making a sound, like in audio, mutual, fuel. In French, you can sometimes have three-letter vowels, like in beau, bureau, or chateau. And in Greek, there are a few two-letter vowel teams, but usually there are not. And the vowels will sometimes divide. They divide in words like biology or theology. Now, we'll look at some silent letters. There are often teams of two letters that always work together to make one sound in Old English or Greek. In Old English, KN or WR at the beginning, MB at the end, and GN anywhere in the word work together to make one sound. In Greek, it often happens with teams of letters starting with a P. French often has single silent letters, a silent H at the beginning or a silent S at the end. While GN is silent in words of Old English origin, it will be pronounced in Latin or French. It will have the normal sounds of GNN in Latin, like in signal, but sounds like NY in French, as in vignette or poignant. Looking back at this chart, we can see how many two-letter vowel teams English has. There's only a few two-letter vowel teams in Latin. In Latin, they will normally divide. This happens in part because of English rules of words not ending in certain letters. So you'll have two vowel teams that make the same sound, like AI and AY for A, and OI and OY for OI. Also, in between these columns, AU and AW, EU, EW, and OU and OW. Now we're going to look at a few more differences. DGE is often used to make a j sound in Old English, whereas in Latin, sometimes DU, like in educate and individual. QUE in Old English words says qua. However, in a few Latin and French words, it'll say ca, like in mosquito from Latin, mystique and boutique from French. Along similar lines, a GUE in French is often used for ga, vague, intrigue. And French also has a sound that English does not have, je, like in garage. In words of Latin origin, T, can combine with the Y sound of U to make a different sound. Chia, picture, mutual. A similar thing happens with a G combining with a U sound in language and penguin. This also happens in some Spanish words like pueblo. Here are some long vowel ending differences. Long E at the end of a word is usually spelled with a Y in English or Greek, but can be spelled with an IE at the end of French words like caddy or calorie. The long O sound is usually spelled with an OW, like in yellow, at the end of Old English words, but is usually spelled with a single O at the end in the Romance languages and Greek, radio in Latin, taco in Spanish, and telephoto in Greek. Words from Old English are also more likely to have several consonants together in a row, and the consonants SH and WH are unique to Old English. French has some unique patterns too, like a vowel and then two consonants in the vowel at the end. This does not normally happen in English. Or, like in ET and OT, these working together to make a vowel sound, like in ballet and depot. And English usually use OR or ER at the end, and occasional words in French use EUR, like in chauffeur and saboteur. Also, it's hard to see, but they're highlighted in blue, the I's in Latin and French, and any of the Romance languages really sometimes have an E sound, like from the Latin equestrian and audio, and from the French fatigue or mystique or machine. As John Barton of the Royal Shakespeare Company said, "It's the monosyllables that are the bedrock and life of the language," and I believe that is so with Shakespeare. The high words, the high phrases, he sets up to then bring them down to the simple ones which explain them, like making the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red. First there is the high language, then the specific clear definition. Deep feeling probably comes out in monosyllables. He teemed with word invention, but in some way the living power of the language comes from the interplay of the two. So, while we lose some spelling efficiency, we gain some power with this. You can choose words from different origins, and they'll have different sounds and feel and heft and weight. You can say equestrian or horsemanship, aquatic pursuits or water sports. We're going to look at the difference in stress or accent patterns between Old English and Latin words. These also follow different rules. However, within each system, the rules make sense and follow a similar pattern. In Old English, the main part of the word is accented. Believe, believable, unbelievable. Latin has different patterns. If you compare it to the Old English patterns, it looks like the accent shifts around. Democrat, democracy, democratic. However, it actually has its own pattern and rules, and we'll look at that here. Latin words are either going to be accented on the second to last or third to last syllable. Two-syllable words, the accent is always on the first syllable or the second to last syllable. In words of two or more syllables, if the last syllable is long, it's going to be on the second to last syllable. Otherwise, it's on the third to last. So if you look here, these words are all from Webster's Speller, and they're all grouped by syllable, which helps you figure out how to accent and schwa words. And the Latin ones are third to last or second to last. The English ones, compared to the Latin stress, look to move around. However, within each system, they follow consistent rules. English words accent on the main idea of the word. We also do that within sentences. We accent the main word that we're meaning to emphasize. And in Latin, it will either be on the second to last or third to last syllable. Here's a spelling rule that's related to language of origin. Two-syllable words with an accent on the last syllable will double the consonant when adding syllables. These will be words of English origin because Latin words of two syllables will have accent on the first. Here is another word of Old English origin. Since it has its accent on the last syllable, it doubles the consonant when adding a suffix to the end. This is a word of Latin origin. Words of Latin origin have an accent on the first syllable, and words with an accent on the first syllable will not add a consonant when adding a syllable. Since this has an accent on the first syllable, you do not double the T when adding a suffix at the end. Here is another word of Latin origin. Since the accent is on the first syllable, you do not double the consonant when adding a suffix. There's a lot covered in this lesson. I could probably talk for days about it. If you would like to learn more about words by root origin, you can work through the book Words by Marcia Henry. She has words broken up into Romance and Greek and Anglo-Saxon and has spelling rules and exercises and a little bit of vocabulary. It's usually cheapest to order from ProEd. The ABCs and All Their Tricks is a reference book with a lot of great information, not just about word origin. The spelling book is free from Google Books and includes some root word study. And Webster's Speller, while it does not divide things up by word origin, does divide things up into which syllables are accented, which makes it a lot easier to figure out how to sound out and which to schwa and which to accent. Him that is weak in the faith receive ye, but not to doubtful disputations. For one believeth that he may eat all things, another, who is weak, eateth herbs. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not. And let not him which eateth not judge him that eateth, for God hath received him. Who art thou that judgest another man's servant? To his own master he standeth or falleth. Yea, he shall be holden up, for God is able to make him stand. One man esteemeth one day above another, another esteemeth every day alike. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. He that regardeth the day, regardeth it unto the Lord, and he that regardeth not the day, to the Lord he doth not regard it. He that eateth, eateth to the Lord, for he giveth God thanks. And he that eateth not, to the Lord he eateth not, and giveth God thanks. For none of us liveth to himself, and no man dieth to himself. For whether we live unto the Lord, and whether we die unto the Lord. Whether we live, therefore, or die, we are the Lord's. For to this end Christ both died and rose and revived, that he might be Lord both of the dead and living. But why dost thou judge thy brother? Or why dost thou set at naught thy brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. For it is written, As I live, saith the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God. So then every one of us shall give account of himself to God.